If you play video games on PC, it is fairly likely that you are playing them through Steam. With 132 million active users, Valve's storefront holds a firm grip on the PC gaming world. But that dominance hasn't stopped others from trying. Since Steam first launched over 20 years ago, countless companies have attempted to compete with the platform. And throughout all of their different services, games, and offerings, one thing has always held true for the hopeful combatants. They all lose to Steam in the end. It is an extremely fascinating phenomenon, one that tells us a lot about Steam as a platform, our habits as gamers, and the mentalities of other gaming and tech companies. Let's look back on those who have tried to take down the king, and figure out once and for all why Steam competitors just don't work. When Steam first launched all the way back in September 2003, it was a pretty crazy concept, and one that many were actually not particularly fond of. Why go through the effort of downloading a launcher and creating an account when I can just put my CD into the disk drive and start playing? Not to mention, internet capabilities were nowhere near the level we have today, making the act of installing games and downloading required updates a truly daunting task. Realistically speaking, Steam should have been dead on arrival, but luckily it had the backing of Valve, one of the most beloved video game companies ever, and they just so happened to have a brand new game coming out very soon. In 2004, Valve released a little game that you may have heard of called Half-Life 2, and wouldn't you know it, Steam would be required to play the game on PC. With Half-Life 2 being revered as an instant classic and one of the greatest video games ever made, many fans were willing to bite the bullet and enter the Steam ecosystem for the first time. With the momentum from Half-Life 2 behind them, Valve continued evolving Steam into the beloved platform we know today. In 2005, third-party games began being added to Steam, making it more than just a home for Valve games. In 2008, they added Steamworks and Steam Cloud, two revolutionary tools that changed the way developers and players could interact with Steam and their games. By 2013, they had introduced the Steam Workshop, Community Market, and Early Access games. These updates helped Steam feel like more than just a launcher or a storefront. It felt like a true platform and community. When combined with the steady flow of massive releases from Valve such as Portal 2, CSGO, and Dota 2, alongside all of the indie and third-party releases, Steam quickly established itself as the place to be in PC gaming, a title it has held ever since. Through all of the different updates in the decades since, one thing has always stayed the same. Steam is an extremely pro-consumer platform, one that almost never feels like it is out to get you. That is an increasingly rare feeling nowadays, especially from a company as successful as this one. It's no surprise then that Steam has been able to uphold its fantastic reputation, even in a time when people on the internet are incredibly hard to please. With Steam being such a dominant platform that is universally beloved by those who use it, it would be safe to assume there isn't room for any other players in this space, but that certainly hasn't stopped them from giving it a shot. Right as Steam was experiencing its rise to the top in the 2010s, three major third-party game publishers tried to break away from the platform. First, let's talk about Uplay from Ubisoft, which you probably remember as the service that forced you to log in and then showed insanely intrusive notifications every time you got an achievement. Uplay was introduced in 2009 as a Ubisoft reward system before being transitioned into a full digital storefront in 2012. Ubisoft tried everything they could to entice users to their client, keeping games off Steam for extended periods of time and offering insane discounts. But the community never embraced this new service, primarily due to its controversial DRM policies early on. For me, Uplay was just always associated with annoyance. Annoying required logins, annoying pop-ups, and annoying policies, so it's pretty easy to see why it never really caught on. The Ubisoft launcher still exists, now known as Ubisoft Connect, but the company has finally given up their hopes of competing with Steam. The launch of the recently released Assassin's Creed Shadows marked a big change, with Shadows coming to Steam on day one, ending the era of Ubisoft launcher exclusivity periods. Another example was Blizzard with Battle.net. I always found this one to be a bit less egregious since it was mainly used for World of Warcraft, which was basically an entire platform on its own, but Battle.net was also the exclusive exclusive PC home to all other Blizzard games for many years, and after they merged with Activision, games like Destiny 2 and Call of Duty were offered on the service as well. However, Blizzard came to a similar conclusion as Ubisoft, realizing that holding their games off Steam was hurting them more than it was helping. In 2023, Overwatch 2 became the first Blizzard game to launch on Steam, with Diablo 4 following a few months later. Battle.net is in a pretty unique spot though, as Blizzard has not given up on the service entirely. In fact, they recently expanded the platform to include games from Xbox Game Studios, with the first two editions being Avowed and Doom the Dark Ages. But these games are also simultaneously available on Steam, so I'm not totally sure what the plan is there with that, other than just offering a potential option to the very select few who only use Battle.net. Battle.net is still a modern-day Steam competitor by definition, but it doesn't seem Blizzard has any real delusions of taking over. The last third-party publisher we need to look at is EA, who I would say went the most all-in on their goal of competing with Steam. EA's Origin launched in 2011 and got into a quick feud with Steam when Crysis 2 was removed from the platform and became an Origin exclusive. The exclusivity push continued when Battlefield 3 was held off of Steam as well. From that point forward, every EA published game was exclusive to Origin on PC. This vision never came to fruition though, with Origin suffering a similar fate to Uplay, known more for its irritation than anything else. And just like the other two examples we've talked about, EA eventually caved, beginning to bring their games to Steam in 2020. What all three of these companies found is that the potential benefits of controlling your own service and output of games is just not worth the audience you are losing from not having your games on Steam. At this point, nearly all third-party publishers have given up on this dream and accepted that they need their games on Steam to succeed. But what about companies outside of the core gaming space? In the early 2020s, both Google and Amazon tried their hands at a gaming platform. Google had Stadia and Amazon had Luna. Both offered gaming storefronts with a core focus on cloud gaming. Cloud gaming is pretty cool in theory, allowing you to stream games instead of playing them directly off your device. This cuts out the need for a super powerful PC, but will require a pretty strong internet connection to get the most out of the service. And on top of that, you are completely giving up having ownership of your games, with all of them tied to a subscription service where they could disappear at any moment. Both Google and Amazon laid out big plans for these services, including creating in-house first-party games, but that never really ended up happening. Despite being backed by two of the biggest companies in the world, both Stadia and Luna failed to get going. Stadia was completely shut down in 2023, and although Luna is technically still available, it lives on in complete obscurity, barely being supported. I find the failure of Stadia and Luna notable because they did at least try something new. Unlike Ubisoft and EA, who expected you to switch over for a couple exclusive games, Google and Amazon offered a new way to play. Unfortunately for them, this new way to play is not all that enticing, at least in my opinion. And judging by the lack of users on these services, it seems the general gaming audience feels the same. Cloud gaming is continuing to evolve as we speak and will probably become more common one of these days. But for now, Amazon and Google were quite a few years ahead of the curve and attempted to solve a problem that most didn't really have. Okay, so there is one last Steam competitor I haven't mentioned yet, and I saved it for last because it is the most direct and long-lasting Steam competitor we've seen. I am of course referring to the Epic Games Store. Since its release in 2018, Epic has been extremely aggressive with their platform. They have spent millions of dollars on timed exclusivity deals, keeping games off Steam for prolonged periods of time. They have also given away countless free games over the years, including some massive heavy hitters like Grand Theft Auto 5. And these were actually free games, by the way. Not like when someone says a game is free with the PS Plus subscription you paid for. No, these games were free just for creating an account and logging in. Epic even removed previously released games from Steam such as Fall Guys and Rocket League to make them exclusive. And of course, their golden goose Fortnite requires the Epic Games Store to be played on PC. Combine that with the better revenue share for developers, and it seemed like Epic may have been in a position to finally pose a real threat to the Steam monopoly. But instead, not much has changed. The timed exclusivity deals were a big thing at first, but once Steam players noticed they would only have to hold out for a year or two, they were fine waiting. Timed exclusivity deals just don't cut it anymore in the modern age, where there are so many games to play. There is already too much to keep up with in the first place, so who cares if I need to wait an extra year for the new Metro game? Their other big draw was the free games. And this was a truly fantastic benefit, but it didn't seem to get people to stick around. How many of you watching this video can relate to the pattern of opening up the Epic Games Store, claiming the free games, and then immediately closing it? I feel like that makes up a good percentage of their user base, myself included. This no doubt cost Epic millions to pay these developers to give their games away for free, and I'm not sure the return on investment was there. As for the developer side of things, Epic had a strong initial pitch with the better revenue split. But it's not hard to see that this revenue split doesn't really mean much if there was no one there to buy it. Sure, I may get a better split on Epic by releasing my game there, but if I'm going to sell 3 times as many copies on Steam, it ends up being the same in the end. What this means is that Epic is left in the same position as all the other storefronts that came before it, relying on its own exclusive games that they are holding off of Steam. Luckily for them, they are in a better position than most, with Fortnite being one of the biggest games in the world. The exclusivity of Fortnite and the unlimited bank account of Epic Games has been enough to keep the store going, with no signs of stopping at the moment. But it has also become clear that the service has nowhere close to the same level of engagement as Steam. So this raises the question, why don't these Steam competitors work? The main source I will point to comes from a LinkedIn post by Ethan Evans, the former vice president of Prime Gaming at Amazon. In this post, Evans talks about his experience at Amazon and why, in his opinion, their attempts to topple Steam never worked. First off, Amazon seemed to think their size and dominance would be enough to bring in users right away. What they quickly realized is that they had underestimated how attached players were to their existing habits. As Evans puts it, "We never validated our core assumptions before investing heavily in solutions. The truth is that gamers already had the solution to their problems, and they weren't going to switch platforms just because a new one was available." This quote feels as though it could apply to all of the platforms we've discussed today. Every Steam competitor's main motivation for existing is purely to extract more money for themselves. EA, Ubisoft, and Epic are all making these platforms simply so they can avoid sharing revenue with Valve. And yeah, I get it, making money is the only true reason that any service or company exists, but you need to at least pretend that isn't the case. You have to try and mask this by offering things that entice consumers, the all-important step that every Steam competitor seems to miss. Players are not going to switch platforms unless you give them a reason, and no, the fact that you are Ubisoft or EA or Amazon is not a valid reason. If any platform ever truly hopes to compete with Steam, they need to offer something that is demonstrably better, and so far no one has done that, or seemingly even attempted to in most cases. In my recap of all the different Steam competitors, you may have noticed I rarely mentioned any unique features or improvements. This is because all the Steam competitors we've seen are usually just worse versions of what we already have. They have less features and games, more complications, and just generally run worse. What these companies don't seem to understand is that when you ask someone to use your service, you are not just asking someone to use a launcher that isn't Steam. You are asking someone to remove themselves from a platform that they have been investing in for years, if not decades. There are items and games and friends and memories associated with that platform. In order to use your new service, they need to leave all of that behind. So while it's easy to say all you need to do is click a different launcher, it really is so much more than that. To reference the LinkedIn post once again, just because you are big enough to build something doesn't mean people will use it. In other words, a Steam competitor needs to offer something new or solve an existing problem. The only issue is there was no real problem to be solved. No real big missing feature that Valve refuses to add. No major anti-consumer policies pushing people away. So when these other companies step in and begin to build their platforms, they are attempting to solve problems that don't even exist. As long as this fact remains true, and as long as Steam continues operating as they have for the last 20 years, I see no scenario where anyone can truly contend with them.